The emergency room buzzed with its usual chaos when Sarah Martinez was wheeled in on a stretcher. Blood soaked through the makeshift bandage on her left shoulder, and her face was pale from blood loss. The paramedics rattled off vital signs to the waiting medical team, but Sarah remained conscious, her dark eyes alert despite the pain coursing through her body. Dr. Marcus Thompson, a former Navy SEAL turned trauma surgeon, took charge immediately. His colleagues knew his background but rarely discussed it. The transition from special operations to medicine had been his way of continuing to save lives, just in a different battlefield. His hands moved with the precision that came from years of treating wounded soldiers in combat zones. Female, mid-30s, gunshot wound to the left shoulder, the paramedic reported, found at the scene of an attempted robbery. She fought back. Marcus nodded, his trained eyes already assessing the wound. Something about the way Sarah held herself caught his attention. Despite the obvious pain, she maintained a controlled breathing pattern that seemed too disciplined for a civilian. Her eyes tracked every movement in the room with an awareness that reminded him of his former teammates. "Ma'am, I'm Dr. Thompson. We're going to take good care of you," he said, leaning over the gurney. "Can you tell me your name?" "Sarah Martinez," she replied, her voice steady despite her condition. The bullet went through. "Exit wound on the back," Marcus paused. Most civilians wouldn't know to assess their own wounds so clinically. "Are you in the medical field?" Sarah hesitated for just a moment. "No, just lucky guess." The team moved her into Trauma Bay 3 where Marcus began his examination. As he carefully cut away her blood-soaked shirt, he noticed something that made him freeze. There, just below her collarbone, was a small faded tattoo. It was simple but unmistakable to anyone who had served in special operations. A trident surrounded by an eagle, anchor, and flintlock pistol. The Navy SEAL trident. But this version was different. It had been modified, feminized in a way that he had only seen once before, during a classified briefing about a highly secretive unit that most people didn't even know existed. His hands trembled slightly as he continued his examination, his mind racing through possibilities. "Nurse, I need you to prep or two," Marcus said, his voice maintaining its professional tone while his thoughts churned. "This is going to require surgery." Sarah's eyes met his, and for a brief moment he saw something flicker there. Recognition, fear, it was gone too quickly to identify, but it confirmed his suspicions that there was more to this patient than met the eye. As the surgical team prepared, Marcus found himself studying Sarah's physical condition more carefully. Beneath the blood and civilian clothes, he could see the telltale signs of someone who maintained elite physical fitness. Her muscle tone, the way she instinctively protected her core even while injured, the small scars that peppered her hands and forearms, all indicators of someone with extensive combat training. The bullet had indeed passed through cleanly, missing major arteries by millimeters. As Marcus worked to control the bleeding and assess the damage, he couldn't shake the feeling that this woman's story was far more complex than a simple robbery victim who fought back. "Dr. Thompson," the head nurse called softly, "the police want to speak with the patient when she's stable. They said the scene was unusual." "Unusual how?" "3 armed men down, all subdued with what they described as professional-level hand-to-hand combat techniques. The patient was found unconscious from blood loss, but the attackers were zip-tied with their own shoelaces." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. 3 trained criminals taken down by an injured woman? That wasn't just fighting back. That was advanced combat skills in action. His suspicions about the modified SEAL trident tattoo suddenly seemed much more plausible. During the surgery, Marcus found himself working with unusual focus. Sarah's body told a story of violence and survival that civilian doctors rarely encountered. Old fractures that had healed with military precision, muscle memory that maintained perfect form even under anesthesia, and most telling of all, the systematic way her body had been conditioned to handle trauma. As he sutured the entry wound, Marcus noticed defensive wounds on Sarah's hands that were weeks old. Someone had been hunting her, and tonight's encounter wasn't her first. The pattern of injuries suggested a sustained campaign of violence that she had been successfully evading until tonight. The surgery took 2 hours. Marcus repaired torn muscle tissue, cleaned debris from the wound channel, and ensured no permanent damage to Sarah's shoulder function. Throughout the procedure, his mind kept returning to that tattoo and what it might mean. When Sarah was moved to recovery, Marcus found himself unable to leave her bedside. He told himself it was standard post-operative monitoring, but the truth was more complicated. If his suspicions were correct, this woman represented something he thought he might never encounter again, a fellow warrior who had served in ways that couldn't be discussed or acknowledged. Sarah stirred as the anesthesia wore off, her eyes immediately alert and scanning the room. Marcus watched as she quickly assessed her surroundings, located exits, and evaluated potential threats, all in the span of seconds. It was behavior he recognized from his own training. "How long was I out?" she asked, her voice still slightly hoarse from the breathing tube. "About 4 hours total. Surgery went well. You'll have full function of your shoulder once you heal." Sarah nodded, then her eyes fixed on Marcus with sudden intensity. "You saw it, didn't you?" Marcus didn't pretend to misunderstand. "The tattoo?" "Yes, and you know what it means." "I have an idea. But it's not possible. That program was never officially acknowledged." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "A lot of things aren't officially acknowledged, Doc. Doesn't mean they don't exist." The room went cold as the implications settled between them. Marcus realized he was standing in the presence of someone whose service record was buried so deep that even acknowledging it could be dangerous. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding of secrets that could never be fully shared. "The men who did this," Marcus said finally. "This wasn't random, was it?" Sarah's expression hardened. "Nothing about my life has been random for a very long time." The next morning brought a steady stream of visitors that made Marcus increasingly uncomfortable. First came Detective Rodriguez, a weathered man whose questions seemed too pointed for a simple robbery investigation. Then Agent Chen from an agency that didn't identify itself clearly, followed by a military liaison who spoke in careful, measured tones about ongoing security concerns. Sarah answered their questions with the practiced skill of someone trained in counter-interrogation. She gave them enough truth to satisfy their immediate needs, while revealing nothing about her real background. Marcus watched from the nurse's station, fascinated by the delicate dance of information control happening in that hospital room. "She's quite something, isn't she?" Marcus turned to find Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the hospital's chief of psychiatry, standing beside him with 2 cups of coffee. Her expression was thoughtful as she observed the interrogation through the window. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. 20 years of evaluating trauma patients, and I've never seen anyone compartmentalize like that. Most people who survive what she went through last night would be showing signs of shock, PTSD symptoms, emotional volatility. She's displaying the psychological profile of someone with extensive trauma conditioning. Marcus sipped his coffee, choosing his words carefully. "Some people handle stress better than others." "Marcus, I've read your file. I know about your military background. You recognize something in her, don't you?" Before Marcus could respond, Agent Chen emerged from Sarah's room looking frustrated. The detective followed, shaking his head and muttering something about need-to-know basis and classified complications. When the military liaison left an hour later, Marcus noticed he spent considerable time on his phone in the parking lot, making calls that seemed urgent and concerned. Whatever Sarah's real story was, it had people in very high places worried. Marcus waited until visiting hours ended before returning to Sarah's room. She was sitting up in bed, staring out the window at the city lights below. Her posture was alert despite the pain medication, and he could see the tension in her shoulders that spoke of someone constantly ready for danger. "Rough day?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her bed. "I've had worse." Sarah turned to look at him, and he was struck by the depth of exhaustion in her eyes. Not physical tiredness, but the bone-deep weariness of someone who had been running for far too long. "How long?" Marcus asked quietly. "Since I got out?" 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. "And they've been hunting you all that time?" Sarah nodded slowly. "The program I was part of, let's just say some of the people involved weren't interested in letting former participants retire quietly. Too many secrets, too much liability." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors during his own service about black operations that went beyond normal special forces work, programs so classified that even their existence was compartmentalized beyond typical special access protocols. The men last night, they weren't random criminals, were they? Private contractors, former military, probably Eastern European based on their tactics. Someone's paying good money to clean up loose ends from operations that officially never happened. "How many others like you are there?" Sarah's smile was grim. "Fewer every month." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah wasn't just a former special operator trying to build a new life. She was a marked woman, hunted by people with resources and connections that reached into the highest levels of government and military. Why haven't you gone to the authorities? Requested protection? From who? The same people who authorized the program in the first place? The ones who decided we knew too much to be allowed to disappear quietly. Sarah shifted in her bed, wincing slightly from the shoulder wound. Besides, officially, I don't exist. My records were purged when the program was terminated. Sarah Martinez is a carefully constructed identity that's held up for 3 years, but it's starting to fracture. Marcus absorbed this information, his medical training warring with his protective instincts. As a doctor, his responsibility was to treat her injuries and ensure her recovery. As a former SEAL, he understood the code that demanded he help a fellow warrior in need. The tattoo, he said finally. I've only seen that modification once before, in a briefing about maritime operations that required specialized skills. Sarah's expression sharpened. What kind of briefing? Joint Task Force meeting. Counterterrorism, maritime interdiction. Someone mentioned a unit that didn't officially exist but had capabilities that regular SEAL teams couldn't match. Female operators who could access targets that were impossible for men to reach. And what did you think about that? Marcus considered his words carefully. I thought it was brilliant, and I thought those women were probably the most dangerous people on the planet. For the first time since he'd met her, Sarah smiled genuinely. We were pretty good at our jobs. What happened to the program? Politics. Budget cuts. A mission that went sideways and attracted too much attention. The decision was made to terminate operations and eliminate all traces. Most of us accepted the offered retirement packages and relocated to new identities. A few of us asked too many questions about what really happened on that last mission. And those are the ones being hunted. The ones still alive. Yes. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Sarah wasn't just his patient anymore. She was a fellow warrior who needed backup, and the oath he'd taken as a SEAL to never leave a teammate behind suddenly felt more relevant than his Hippocratic oath. How long before they find you again? The attack last night means they've located this identity. I probably have 48 hours before they send better assets. Professional killers instead of thugs for hire. Where will you go? Sarah was quiet for a long moment and Marcus could see her calculating odds and options in her head. I have a few contingency plans. Safe houses that might still be viable, but honestly, I'm tired of running. Part of me is tempted to just find a good defensive position and make my stand. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to end this. Take enough of them down that the cost-benefit analysis changes. Make hunting me more expensive than leaving me alone. Marcus understood the logic even as he rejected it emotionally. He had seen too many good soldiers choose to go down fighting, rather than continue living in hiding. It was an honorable choice, but it was still death. There might be another option, he said slowly. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Such as? What if you didn't have to run alone anymore? Marcus spent the night researching everything he could find about black operations and terminated programs. The internet offered fragments and conspiracy theories, but his old contacts provided more substantial information. 3 carefully worded phone calls to former teammates revealed a disturbing pattern of accidents and suicides among operators who had served in classified programs over the past 5 years. By morning, he had made his decision. Sarah was being discharged against medical advice. Her shoulder needed more recovery time, but staying in the hospital made her a sitting target. Marcus found her in her room, fully dressed and checking the hallway through a mirror positioned to give her a view of anyone approaching. You're leaving, he observed. Hospital security is a joke, and too many people know I'm here. I need to move before they bring in professionals. Sarah shouldered a small backpack with practiced efficiency, favoring her wounded arm only slightly. I meant what I said last night, about not running alone. Sarah studied his face carefully. Marcus, you don't know what you're offering. These people don't just target operators. They eliminate anyone who becomes a liability. Family, friends, medical professionals who ask too many questions. I don't have family. My wife died in a car accident 2 years ago and we never had children. My parents are gone and I'm not close to my siblings. The people hunting you have already made me a liability just by treating you. That's not how this works. You can report our conversation as patient confidentiality. Distance yourself and stay safe. Marcus shook his head. I took an oath once, a long time ago. Never leave a teammate behind. You're not just my patient, Sarah. You're a fellow warrior who needs backup. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see her weighing the risks and benefits of accepting help. Finally, she spoke. If we do this, it's not a rescue mission. It's a partnership. I won't be protected and hidden while you take risks on my behalf. Understood. What do you need? First, we need to get out of here without being tracked. Then we need to assess what resources we have and figure out who's really behind the hunting campaign. If we're going to end this, we need to go after the source, not just the contractors they're hiring. Marcus nodded. I have a cabin in the mountains. Off-grid, defensible position and stocked with supplies. It belonged to my grandfather, so it's not connected to my current identity in any obvious way. How far? 3 hours by car. Longer if we take back roads to avoid traffic cameras. Sarah considered this. It's a start. But first, I need to retrieve some equipment I've had stored for emergencies. There's a storage unit across town that contains resources we'll need if we're really going to do this. What kind of resources? Weapons, communication gear, documentation for alternate identities, and information I've been gathering about the people hunting me. If we're going to war, we need proper intelligence. Marcus felt a familiar surge of adrenaline that he hadn't experienced since leaving the teams. The careful planning, the assessment of risks and resources, the preparation for a mission with unclear parameters but critical objectives. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. How do we get out of here without being noticed? Sarah smiled, and for the first time Marcus saw a glimpse of the operator she had once been. Leave that to me. But first I need you to understand something. The people hunting me aren't just criminals or rogue contractors. They have government connections, access to official resources, and the ability to make problems disappear through legal channels. Once we walk out of this hospital together, you become an enemy of some very powerful people. I understand. Do you? Because there's no going back. Your life as Dr. Marcus Thompson, respected trauma surgeon, ends the moment we leave this building together. Are you prepared for that? Marcus thought about his empty apartment, his routine of work and sleep and painful memories of his dead wife. He thought about the purpose he had lost when he left the military and the hollow satisfaction of his civilian life. Then he looked at Sarah, this dangerous woman who represented a chance to matter again, to stand for something worth fighting for. My life as I knew it ended 2 years ago. Maybe it's time to find out who I really am. Sarah studied his face one more time, then nodded. All right. Here's what we're going to do. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus would leave first, using his hospital badge to access the service elevators and exit through the staff parking garage. He would retrieve his car and wait at a predetermined location 6 blocks away. Meanwhile, Sarah would use the hospital's laundry service to slip out undetected. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat in his Honda Civic, watching the rearview mirror for any signs of surveillance. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the familiar pre-mission tension that he remembered from his military days. Sarah appeared at his passenger door exactly on schedule, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had made a career of not being seen. She slipped into the seat beside him, and Marcus noticed she was carrying a small bag that definitely hadn't been in her room earlier. Drive, she said simply. Head east toward the interstate, but take surface streets for the first few miles. As they pulled away from the hospital, Marcus caught sight of 2 men in dark suits entering the building's main entrance. Sarah noticed them too. Right on schedule, she murmured. Professional crew, probably CIA contractors or military intelligence. We've got maybe a 4-hour head start before they realize I'm gone and start tracking us. Will they be able to track us? They'll try. Credit cards, cell phones, traffic cameras, facial recognition software. But I've been preparing for this possibility for 3 years. We'll be fine if we're careful. Marcus turned off his cell phone and handed it to Sarah, who removed the battery and tossed both pieces out the window. Burner phones from now on, she explained, and cash only for everything. As they drove through the city, Sarah explained the basics of operational security, how to spot surveillance, how to vary their route and timing to avoid patterns, how to communicate in ways that couldn't be intercepted. Marcus found himself remembering skills he hadn't used in years, muscle memory returning as they planned their next moves. The storage unit first, Sarah said. Then we disappear into the mountains and figure out our next move. But Marcus, once we open that storage unit, there's no pretending this is anything other than what it is. We'll be armed and operational, Two fugitives with classified knowledge and the skills to be very dangerous. Are you sure you're ready for that? Marcus thought about the oath he had taken years ago, about the teammates he had lost in distant wars, about the woman beside him who represented both incredible danger and the chance to finally matter again. I'm ready, he said, and meant it completely. The storage facility sat on the outskirts of town, a sprawling complex of beige metal buildings that looked like any other commercial storage operation. Sarah had Marcus park 3 blocks away, and they approached on foot. Using the shadows between buildings to avoid the security cameras she seemed to know the location of instinctively. Unit 247, she whispered, leading him through a maze of identical corridors. I've been paying cash rent on this place for 2 years, using a fake identity that's held up so far. She produced a key from somewhere in her jacket and opened the heavy metal door. Marcus stepped inside and felt his breath catch. The unit looked like a military armory crossed with the intelligence analyst's office. Weapon cases lined one wall, while the opposite wall was covered with maps, photographs, and what appeared to be surveillance reports connected by colored string. Jesus, Sarah, how long have you been planning for this? Since the day I realized they weren't going to let us retire quietly. She moved to one of the weapon cases and opened it, revealing a collection of firearms that Marcus recognized as military-grade equipment. I spent my first year underground thinking I could just disappear. The second year I realized I needed to understand who was hunting us and why. This past year I've been preparing to fight back. Marcus examined the intelligence wall while Sarah gathered equipment, photos of men in expensive suits, government buildings, corporate logos, and what appeared to be surveillance photos of other women who looked like former operators. Red X's had been drawn over several of the faces. These are the other women from your unit? Sarah paused in her packing. The ones I've been able to track. 7 of us asked questions when the program ended. 4 are dead now, officially from accidents or suicides. 2 others have disappeared completely. I'm the only one left who's still fighting. What questions did you ask? About the last mission. About why it really went wrong and who gave the orders that got 3 of our teammates killed. Sarah's voice hardened. The official report blamed equipment failure and bad intelligence. But we knew better. Someone wanted that mission to fail, and they used us to cover up something bigger. Marcus studied the photos more carefully. These men, they're the ones behind the hunting campaign? The ones I've been able to identify. A mix of government officials, defense contractors, and private military executives. They all have one thing in common. They profited when our program was terminated and its assets were redistributed. Assets meaning what? Equipment, facilities, ongoing contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Our program was shuttered, but the money didn't disappear. It went to other projects, other companies owned by these men. Marcus felt pieces clicking together in his mind. So killing off the operators isn't just about keeping secrets. It's about eliminating witnesses to fraud. Exactly. We're not just security risks. We're evidence of crimes that could bring down some very powerful people. Sarah finished packing a large duffel bag with weapons and ammunition, which is why they're not going to stop hunting us ever. She moved to a filing cabinet and withdrew several thick folders. I've been building a case, documenting connections, following money trails. But I need more evidence, and I need someone with the skills to help me get it. What kind of evidence? Financial records, communication intercepts, testimony from other survivors. Enough to prove that our program was deliberately sabotaged for profit, and that the hunt for survivors is part of an ongoing criminal conspiracy. Marcus picked up one of the folders and began reading. The documents inside painted a picture of corruption that reached into the highest levels of the defense establishment. Contracts awarded without proper bidding, programs terminated to benefit specific companies, and a systematic effort to eliminate anyone who could testify about what they had witnessed. This is explosive material, Sarah, but who can we trust with it? If these people have this much influence, that's the problem. Traditional law enforcement and oversight agencies are compromised. We need to go around them, find someone with the power to act independently and the integrity to do the right thing. Sarah opened another case, revealing sophisticated communication equipment. But first we need to gather more evidence. There's a facility about 200 miles north of here, officially decommissioned but still operating under private contract. I believe it contains records that could prove everything. What kind of facility? A black site data center. It's where they stored all the documentation from terminated programs before officially destroying it. Except I don't think they actually destroyed anything. I think they're keeping it as insurance against each other. Marcus understood the implications immediately. So we break in and steal the files. We infiltrate, gather evidence, and extract without detection. If we can get those records and combine them with what I've already collected, we'll have enough to expose the entire conspiracy. And if we can't? Sarah's expression was grim. Then we die, and they continue cleaning up loose ends until every witness is eliminated. Marcus looked around the storage unit, taking in the careful preparation and desperate hope it represented. Sarah had been fighting alone for 3 years, staying one step ahead of professional killers while building a case that could bring down some of the most powerful people in the country. It was either the most courageous thing he had ever encountered, or the most suicidal. What's our timeline? They'll have tracking teams out looking for us within hours. We need to be at the facility before they can coordinate a proper search grid. That gives us maybe 18 hours to plan, infiltrate, and extract before they lock down the entire region. And if they catch us, then we fight. And if we can't win, we make sure the evidence gets out anyway. Sarah handed him a secure phone. I've got dead man switches in place. If we don't check in every 12 hours, copies of everything I've gathered go to journalists and prosecutors simultaneously. Marcus activated the phone and saw that it contained contact information for investigative reporters, federal prosecutors, and congressional oversight committees. Sarah had indeed been planning for every contingency, including their deaths. There's one more thing, Sarah said, her voice softening slightly. This mission, it's not just about survival anymore. It's about justice for the women who died and prevention of future atrocities. But it's also extremely dangerous, and the odds of success are not good. If you want to back out, now is the time. Marcus looked at the intelligence wall with its photos of dead operators and corrupt officials. He thought about his oath as a SEAL, his promise as a doctor to do no harm, and the choice between a safe, empty life and a dangerous fight for justice. I'm in, he said simply. What do we need to do first? Sarah smiled, and Marcus saw in her expression the fierce determination that had kept her alive for 3 years of running and fighting. First, we get to my cabin and plan the mission properly. Then we gear up and head north. By tomorrow night, we'll either have the evidence we need to end this, or we'll be dead. Marcus shouldered one of the equipment bags, feeling the familiar weight of combat gear and the surge of purpose that came with accepting a dangerous mission. Then let's get started. As they locked up the storage unit and prepared to disappear into the mountains, Marcus realized that his life had just changed completely and irreversibly. There would be no going back to his quiet medical practice and empty apartment. He was a warrior again, with a mission that mattered and a partner who understood the true cost of fighting for what was right. The hunt was about to become a war. The mountain cabin sat hidden among dense pine trees, accessible only by a winding dirt road that Marcus's grandfather had carved out decades earlier. As they approached in the gathering dusk, Sarah systematically scanned the surrounding terrain with the professional eye of someone trained in tactical assessment. Good fields of fire, multiple escape routes, natural concealment, she observed approvingly. Your grandfather knew what he was doing when he picked this spot. He was a Marine in Korea. Said he always wanted a place where he could see trouble coming from a long way off. Marcus pulled the car behind the cabin, where it would be hidden from aerial surveillance. He taught me to hunt and shoot up here when I was a kid. Inside, the cabin was spartanly furnished but well maintained. Sarah immediately began setting up their equipment while Marcus activated the generator and checked the water system. Within an hour, they had transformed the rustic retreat into a functional operations center. Sarah spread her intelligence files across the kitchen table, weighing down the corners with coffee mugs to keep them flat. All right, let's plan this properly. The facility we're targeting is called Mountain View Data Solutions. Officially, it's a private cloud storage company. Unofficially, it's where they store classified documents that are too sensitive to destroy, but too dangerous to keep in official channels. Marcus studied the satellite, photos, and building schematics Sarah had somehow acquired. Security? Heavier than it appears. The building looks like a typical office complex, but it's got reinforced construction, advanced alarm systems, and a quick response security team that's definitely ex-military. Plus, it's only 20 miles from a National Guard base, so backup can arrive quickly if things go wrong. How do we get in? Sarah pulled out more detailed plans. The facility processes legitimate commercial data during the day, so there's regular traffic of employees and service technicians. But the classified storage is in a sub-basement that requires special access. We'll need to get inside during business hours, then access the restricted areas after the normal staff leaves. That's a long time to stay hidden inside a hostile facility. Agreed, which is why we're not going in as intruders. We're going in as employees. Sarah produced a set of identification badges and work uniforms. I've been developing this identity for months. Rebecca Hayes, network security consultant, brought in to evaluate their cyber defenses. You'll be Dr. Michael Harrison, her technical assistant. Marcus examined the fake credentials, impressed by their apparent authenticity. How did you manage this? 3 years of careful preparation and some very expensive forgers. The identities are solid enough to pass casual inspection, but they won't hold up to serious background checks. We'll have maybe 4 hours before someone gets suspicious. And once we're inside, Sarah traced a path through the building schematics with her finger. We conduct a legitimate security assessment during the day, which gives us access to the building's computer systems and a reason to be asking questions about restricted areas. When the day shift leaves, we make our way to the sub-basement and access the classified storage. What are we looking for specifically? Financial records from my unit's termination, communication intercepts showing who gave the kill orders for the final mission, and documentation of the contract transfers that followed. If we can find all three, we'll have proof of the entire conspiracy. Marcus studied the timeline Sarah had sketched out. It's ambitious. A lot of things have to go right. Most good plans are ambitious, but I've been thinking about this for months and I believe it's our best chance. The facility is isolated enough that we can approach undetected, but not so remote that our presence will be automatically suspicious. They spent the next several hours going over every detail of the plan. Sarah had anticipated dozens of potential complications and developed contingencies for each. Her preparation was thorough and professional, but Marcus could see the strain of 3 years of constant vigilance in her eyes. When did you last sleep through the night? He asked during a break in their planning. Sarah paused, coffee cup halfway to her lips. I don't remember. Probably before the program ended. You learned a catnap when you're constantly being hunted. You can't keep going indefinitely. The stress will eventually compromise your judgment. I know, which is why this mission has to succeed. I'm running out of time, resources, and energy. If we can't end this now, I won't be able to keep running much longer. Marcus understood the weight of that admission. Sarah had been carrying this burden alone for 3 years, staying ahead of professional killers while building a case against some of the most powerful people in the government. The fact that she was still alive and functional was a testament to her skills and determination, but everyone had limits. After we get the evidence, what's the end game? Simultaneous release to multiple journalists, federal prosecutors, and congressional oversight committees. The information is too explosive to suppress if it comes out through enough channels at once. The key is making sure we survive long enough to ensure the releases happen. And then, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then maybe we can stop running. Maybe we can have normal lives again, or as normal as possible for people with our backgrounds. Marcus heard the longing in her voice and realized how much she had sacrificed in her fight for justice. 3 years of isolation, constant danger, and the knowledge that every day might be her last. It was a price that few people could pay without breaking. We should get some rest, he said finally. We need to be sharp tomorrow. Sarah nodded, but Marcus could see the reluctance in her expression. Sleep meant vulnerability, and vulnerability had been a luxury she couldn't afford for 3 years. I'll take first watch, Marcus offered. Wake me in 4 hours. Marcus, you don't have to. Yes, I do. We're partners now, remember? That means you don't carry the entire burden alone anymore. For the first time since he'd met her, Sarah looked genuinely surprised. Then her expression softened into something that might have been gratitude or relief. Thank you, she said quietly. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have backup. As Sarah settled into the cabin's single bedroom, Marcus positioned himself by the front window with a clear view of the access road. The night was quiet except for the sounds of wind through pine trees and the distant call of an owl. He checked his watch, 22:47 hours. In less than 12 hours, they would be walking into what could be either vindication or death. Marcus found himself thinking about the path that had brought him to this moment. 5 years ago, he had been a respected surgeon living a comfortable life with his wife. Now he was sitting in a mountain cabin with weapons and fake identification, preparing to break into a classified facility with a woman whose real name he still didn't know completely. The irony wasn't lost on him. As a SEAL, he had risked his life in foreign countries to protect American interests. Now he was preparing to risk his life against Americans to protect those same interests from corruption and betrayal. The enemy had changed, but the mission remained fundamentally the same: protect the innocent and fight for what was right. Around midnight, he heard Sarah moving quietly in the bedroom. A few minutes later, she appeared in the doorway, fully dressed and alert. "Can't sleep?" he asked quietly. "Too many years of staying ready to run. My body doesn't know how to relax anymore." She settled into a chair beside him, her own weapon within easy reach. "Tell me about your wife." The question surprised him. "Why?" "Because tomorrow we might die, and I'd like to know something about the man who's willing to risk everything to help a stranger." Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. Her name was Jennifer. She was a pediatric nurse. We met when I was recovering from a training accident at Balboa Hospital. She used to say I was the only SEAL she'd ever met who was more interested in healing people than hurting them. "What happened to her?" "Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with talking about Jennifer. She was coming home from a late shift at the hospital. The other driver walked away without a scratch. "I'm sorry. After she died, I couldn't find meaning in anything. The military felt too distant from helping real people, but civilian medicine felt too routine after years of trauma surgery in combat zones. I was just going through the motions until I met you." Sarah studied his profile in the dim light from the window. "And now?" "Now I remember what it feels like to have a mission that matters." Jennifer would have liked that. She always said I was at my best when I was fighting for something important. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two warriors keeping watch against threats that might materialize from the darkness. Finally, Sarah spoke again. "The other women in my unit, the ones who died, they all had people they were trying to protect. Families, children, husbands who didn't know the real reason their wives were being hunted. That's why they died. They were trying to maintain normal lives while fighting an impossible war. And you?" "I had already lost everyone who mattered before I joined the program. Parents dead, no siblings, no long-term relationships that survived my military career. In some ways, that made me the perfect candidate for black operations. No vulnerabilities, no leverage points for enemies to exploit." Marcus heard the loneliness beneath her matter-of-fact tone. "It also made you the perfect survivor." "Maybe, or maybe it just made me someone with nothing left to lose, which is a different kind of dangerous." At 0400 hours, Marcus woke Sarah for her watch shift. She was instantly alert, a skill that impressed him even after years of military training. He managed 3 hours of deep sleep before his internal clock woke him automatically. They spent the morning making final preparations and reviewing the mission plan one more time. Sarah had acquired detailed building layouts, security protocols, and even employee schedules for the facility. Her preparation was meticulous, but Marcus could see the tension building in her movements as the time for action approached. "Second thoughts?" he asked as they loaded their equipment into the car. "Always, but not about the mission itself. About involving you in this." Sarah secured a concealed pistol beneath her jacket and checked that her fake identification was easily accessible. "You still have time to walk away, Marcus. Find a secure location and wait this out. If we succeed, you'll be vindicated. If we fail, at least you'll survive." Marcus finished loading his own equipment and turned to face her. 3 years ago, I took an oath to save lives whenever possible. Today, I'm honoring that oath. The lives we're trying to save just happen to include our own." Sarah nodded slowly, and Marcus could see her accept his decision with the professionalism of someone who understood the weight of commitment. "Then let's go save some lives." As they drove down the mountain toward what could be their final mission, Marcus felt the familiar pre-combat mixture of fear and anticipation. The plan was solid, their preparation thorough, and their cause just. But in the end, success would depend on skill, luck, and the hope that somewhere in the intelligence community, there were still people who valued truth over convenience. The war for justice was about to begin. Mountain View Data Solutions looked exactly like what it claimed to be: a modern office building housing a legitimate technology company. The parking lot was filled with ordinary cars. Employees in business casual attire walked through the lobby carrying coffee and laptops. and nothing about the exterior suggested the classified secrets hidden in its depths. Marcus and Sarah approached the building at 0900 hours. Dressed as the network security consultants their fake credentials claimed them to be. Sarah carried a laptop bag filled with legitimate penetration testing software, while Marcus wheeled a case of diagnostic equipment that would pass casual inspection. "Remember," Sarah murmured as they approached the main entrance, "we're here to evaluate their cybersecurity at the request of their insurance company. Routine assessment, nothing unusual. Answer questions directly, but don't volunteer information." The security guard at the front desk barely glanced at their identification before calling up to confirm their appointment. Within minutes, they were being escorted to the IT department by a nervous-looking manager named Stevens, who seemed eager to demonstrate his cooperation with the security assessment. "We've been meaning to have this kind of evaluation done for months," Stevens explained as he led them through corridors lined with server rooms and network equipment. "Corporate keeps pushing it back due to budget concerns, but the insurance company finally insisted." Sarah nodded professionally while mentally cataloging every security camera, access control point, and potential escape route they passed. Insurance companies are taking cyber threats much more seriously these days. A single breach can cost millions in liability. "Exactly, which is why we're so glad you're here. I'll give you access to our main systems and you can test whatever you need to test." Marcus carried the equipment case while observing the building's layout. The official areas matched the schematics Sarah had acquired, but he noticed several corridors and stairwells that weren't on the public building plans. Those would be the access points to the classified levels. They spent the morning conducting a legitimate security assessment, probing the company's network defenses and documenting vulnerabilities. Sarah's technical skills were impressive. She had clearly maintained her expertise during her years underground. But Marcus could see her constantly evaluating their real target, noting guard rotations and identifying the security measures protecting the restricted areas. At lunch, Stevens invited them to the company cafeteria, which provided an opportunity to observe the broader facility operations. Marcus noticed that while most employees had standard access badges, a small number carried different credentials that triggered additional security checkpoints. "Those are our cleared personnel," Stevens explained when Sarah asked about the different badges. "We handle some government contracts that require special access controls. Very routine stuff, but you know how bureaucratic these agencies can be about security protocols." "Of course," Sarah agreed. "We'll need to evaluate those systems as well to provide a complete assessment." "Are there separate network segments for the classified work?" "Oh yes, completely isolated systems, but I'm not cleared for that level. So you'll need to coordinate with our security director this afternoon. He should be back from lunch around 1:30. Marcus and Sarah exchanged subtle glances. The security director would be the one person most likely to spot problems with their credentials or ask uncomfortable questions about their background. They needed to complete their real mission before that meeting. After lunch, Stevens provided them with a conference room to compile their preliminary findings. Once they were alone, Sarah quickly activated a signal detector to check for surveillance equipment in the room. "Clean," she whispered. "We've got maybe 2 hours before we have to meet with security. Time to access the restricted areas." Sarah produced a small device from her laptop bag that looked like a standard network analyzer, but was actually sophisticated electronic lock-picking equipment. This should handle most of their access controls. But we'll need to be careful about security cameras and guard patrols. They left the conference room separately, with Marcus creating a distraction in the IT department, while Sarah slipped away to access the restricted stairwell they had identified earlier. The plan was for her to infiltrate the sub-basement while he maintained their cover story upstairs. 20 minutes later, Marcus's earpiece crackled with Sarah's voice. "I'm in. Sub-basement level accessed. Starting the search now. Copy. Everything's quiet up here. But Stevens is getting anxious about the security director meeting." Marcus continued his legitimate security testing while monitoring Sarah's progress. The facility's network security was actually quite robust, which made him wonder what other defenses might be protecting the classified areas that Sarah was currently penetrating. "Found the archives." Sarah's voice was tense with excitement. "Marcus, this is bigger than we thought. There are files here from dozens of terminated programs, not just ours. Financial records, operational reports, personnel files for operators who were supposedly killed in action, but were actually murdered, Can you copy everything? Working on it. But there's too much data for a quick download. I'm going to have to be selective and focus on our program specifically. Marcus heard footsteps in the corridor outside the conference room. Sarah, we may have a problem. Someone's coming. The door opened and Stevens entered with a tall man in an expensive suit who radiated the controlled alertness of a professional security officer. Marcus's blood ran cold as he recognized the type. Former military intelligence, probably with connections to the same black operations community that had tried to kill Sarah. Dr. Harrison? I'm Director Walsh, Facility Security. I understand you're here to evaluate our cyber defenses. Marcus stood and shook the man's hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact of someone trained in interrogation techniques. That's correct. Just routine penetration testing to satisfy insurance requirements. Of course. And where is your colleague, Ms. Hayes? Conducting network scans in the server room. She should be back shortly. Walsh's expression remained neutral, but Marcus could see him processing information and drawing conclusions. I'd like to meet with both of you before you access any of our classified systems. Security protocols, you understand? Absolutely. I'll contact her now and have her join us. Marcus activated his radio while desperately hoping Sarah was in a position to respond. Rebecca, could you join us in the conference room? Director Walsh would like to meet with you. There was a long pause before Sarah's voice came through, slightly breathless. On my way. Just finishing up some tests. Walsh smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Excellent. I'm looking forward to our conversation. As they waited for Sarah to appear, Marcus realized that their carefully planned infiltration was about to become a desperate improvisation. Walsh clearly suspected something, and if Sarah had been discovered in the restricted areas, they were both walking into a trap. Marcus began mentally cataloging weapons and escape routes while maintaining casual conversation with Walsh and Stevens. The mission was far from over, but it had just become significantly more dangerous. When Sarah finally entered the conference room 5 minutes later, Marcus could see the tension in her movements despite her professional demeanor. She had the data they needed, but now they had to extract safely while under the scrutiny of a security director who might already know who they really were. The next few minutes would determine whether their mission ended in success or capture. Sarah entered the conference room with the controlled composure of someone walking into a potential ambush. Marcus could see the subtle signs of tension in her posture, but to an untrained observer, she appeared to be nothing more than a network security consultant finishing her work. Director Walsh, she said, extending her hand with a professional smile. Rebecca Hayes, I understand you'd like to discuss our security assessment. Walsh shook her hand while studying her face with obvious interest. Ms. Hayes, or should I say Sarah Martinez? Or perhaps you prefer your original designation, Operator 77 Alpha? The room went dead silent. Stevens looked confused, clearly unaware of the implications of what Walsh had just said. Marcus felt his hand move instinctively toward his concealed weapon, but Sarah remained perfectly still. I'm sorry, Director Walsh, but I think you have me confused with someone else, Sarah said calmly. I'm here to conduct a routine cybersecurity assessment. Walsh smiled and moved to block the door. The assessment was legitimate, actually. We've been expecting you for 3 months. Ever since our intelligence indicated you were building a case against certain former colleagues, we thought it would be more convenient to let you come to us rather than continue the expensive manhunt. Marcus realized they had walked directly into a trap. The entire facility was probably designed to lure Sarah into revealing herself, and they had played directly into their enemy's hands. You see, Walsh continued, Mountain View Data Solutions is much more than a simple storage facility. It's a honey trap, designed to attract exactly the kind of person you've become, someone with the skills to penetrate our security and the motivation to seek evidence of past operations. And what evidence would that be? Sarah asked, still maintaining her cover identity. Oh, we know exactly what you're looking for. Financial records from Operation Nightfall, communication logs from the final mission, documentation of contract transfers following program termination. The question is, did you find what you were looking for in our sub-basement archives? Marcus saw Sarah's jaw tighten slightly. Walsh knew about her infiltration, which meant they had been under surveillance from the moment they entered the building. The interesting thing, Walsh continued, is that the evidence you're seeking actually exists. It's all there in our files, exactly as you suspected. Your unit was deliberately sabotaged. Your teammates were murdered to cover up massive fraud, and the hunting campaign against survivors has been orchestrated by the same people who profited from the program's termination. Then why are you helping them? Marcus asked, unable to remain silent any longer. Walsh turned his attention to Marcus with obvious amusement. Dr. Marcus Thompson, former Navy SEAL, currently wanted for questioning in connection with the disappearance of a hospital patient. You've been quite helpful, actually. We weren't sure Sarah would trust anyone enough to accept assistance, but your military background made you the perfect bait. Marcus felt the pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. His encounter with Sarah hadn't been coincidence. It had been orchestrated. Someone had arranged for her to be injured near his hospital, knowing that his background would make him sympathetic to her situation. You arranged the attack, Sarah said, her voice flat with understanding. The 3 men who tried to kill me were your people. Contractors, actually. With instructions to wound but not kill. We needed you injured enough to require medical attention, but functional enough to lead us to your evidence and any allies you might have developed. Stevens looked increasingly uncomfortable as the conversation revealed layers of deception he clearly hadn't been aware of. Director Walsh, I think you should sit down and remain quiet, Walsh said sharply. This conversation is now classified far above your clearance level. Marcus realized that Stevens wasn't part of the conspiracy, just an innocent employee being used as unwitting cover. But that also meant he was now a liability who had heard too much. So what happens now? Sarah asked. You have us, you know about my evidence. Do we disappear like the others? Walsh smiled again, but this time there was something different in his expression. Actually, that depends on you. You see, I have a proposition. I'm listening. The people who ordered the termination of your program and the subsequent hunting campaign made one critical error. They assumed that everyone involved was motivated purely by greed or fear. But some of us joined this operation for different reasons. Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Walsh's tone had shifted subtly, suggesting complexity in his motivations that hadn't been apparent before. 3 years ago, I was approached to help coordinate the elimination of Operation Nightfall survivors. I was told it was a matter of national security, that you and the others possessed information that could compromise ongoing operations and get current operators killed. And you believed that? Initially, yes, but as the campaign progressed, I began to see inconsistencies. The people being eliminated weren't security risks. They were witnesses to criminal activity. The operations weren't protecting national security. They were protecting profits. Walsh moved away from the door and activated what appeared to be a signal jammer. For the past 18 months, I've been documenting the real conspiracy while pretending to participate in it. The evidence you found in our archives? I've been collecting and preserving it specifically for someone with your skills and motivation. Sarah studied Walsh carefully, clearly evaluating whether this was another layer of deception or a genuine revelation. Why should we trust you? Because 6 months ago they ordered me to eliminate the last surviving member of Operation Nightfall. You. And instead of following orders, I've been protecting you while building a case against the real criminals. Marcus felt his worldview shifting again. The attack at the hospital, the manhunt, the pressure to drive us here, you've been controlling all of it? Directing it, yes, but with the goal of bringing you to a secure location where we could combine your evidence with mine and coordinate a joint revelation that would be impossible to suppress or discredit. Sarah remained skeptical. And why would you risk your career and possibly your life to help us? Walsh was quiet for a moment, then spoke with obvious emotion. Because one of the women your program killed was my daughter, Lieutenant Amy Walsh, officially killed in action during a training accident. Actually murdered because she asked the same questions you did about Operation Nightfall. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Walsh wasn't just another security contractor. He was a father seeking justice for his murdered child. I've spent 3 years infiltrating this conspiracy, documenting their crimes and waiting for an opportunity to bring them down safely. You represent that opportunity, Sarah. Together, we have enough evidence to expose the entire network and ensure that justice is finally served. Sarah looked at Marcus, then back at Walsh. What are you proposing? A coordinated revelation. Multiple releases of evidence through channels that can't be suppressed or discredited. Criminal prosecutions, congressional investigations, media exposure. Complete destruction of the network that killed your teammates and my daughter. And in return, new identities, relocation, protection, until the prosecutions are complete. A chance to live normal lives without constantly looking over your shoulders. Marcus realized they were being offered exactly what Sarah had been fighting for during 3 years of hiding and running. Justice for the murdered operators, safety for the survivors, and accountability for the criminals who had orchestrated the entire conspiracy. There's one condition, Walsh continued. This has to be done properly, legally, through official channels. No more vigilante justice, no more operating outside the law. We build an ironclad case and let the system handle the prosecutions. Sarah considered this for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, Director Walsh, let's bring these bastards down. As Walsh began outlining the plan for coordinated revelations and legal proceedings, Marcus realized that their desperate mission had transformed into something much larger. They weren't just fighting for survival. Anymore, they were part of a coalition seeking justice that reached from the highest levels of government to a father's love for his murdered daughter. The war for truth was finally beginning in earnest, and for the first time in 3 years they had reason to hope for victory.